Rivers are disappearing. Italy's Po is yet another casualty of the severe drought gripping much of the continent.
The Euphrates River has been one of the most important rivers throughout human history. Along with the Tigris River, it makes up the cradle of civilization, known as the Fertile Crescent. In the Bible, the Euphrates was even mentioned as one of the 4 rivers that served the Garden of Eden. But now, in the face of global change and human impact, the river is under threat, presenting conflict in an already white-hot part of the world. The sudden transformation of the river and the escalating global trade tensions seem to be leading toward a predetermined final scenario for the world. What the Bible reminds us about the end times is no longer far off. 2025 will witness a dramatic shift that will surely leave you astonished. Is it a sign to the end? Located in the heart of the Middle East, it's one of the longest rivers in Western Asia, starting in southern Turkey and flowing through Syria and Iraq before combining with the Tigris River to become the Shatt al-Arab. It then flows into the mighty Persian Gulf. Today, the river is a vital source of fresh water in a very arid part of the world, serving over 23 million people. Similar to other important rivers throughout the world, like the Amazon and the Colorado, it is threatened as a result of climate change and overuse. The Euphrates River also runs through a war-torn part of the world in Syria, where a 12-year civil war has caused chaos, and Iraq, where protracted conflict has also led to a lack of stability. Recent reports showed that the Euphrates River is drying up due to a complex set of factors. The Ataturk Dam, located in Turkey, is one of 22 dams along the river that were built in the 1980s and 90s to provide irrigation and hydroelectric power. As a result, less of the river drains downstream. Additionally, global climate change has led to drought with decreased rainfall in the river basin. Warmer temperatures have also led to increased evaporation, especially as water levels continue to drop. Levels are dangerously low, and the concern is that the river will dry up completely by 2040. But some scientists believe this process will be faster, and it might happen in 2025. With this drying up, the high possibility of a trade war breaking out in 2025, leading to the huge world conflict, is one of the factors leading us to the end times. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order imposing new tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China. Under the new U.S. order, import tariffs on Chinese goods will be set at 10%, while most goods from Canada and Mexico will face a 25% tariff. Canada has also announced retaliatory measures, imposing a 25% tariff on $107 billion worth of U.S. goods. Mexico has likewise declared that it will implement equivalent countermeasures. Meanwhile, China has stated that it will file a complaint with the WTO and take appropriate measures to protect its trade interests. Trump also suggested the 27-nation European Union would be his next target, but did not say when. Trump's aggressive tariff policy is part of his long-term strategy to strengthen America's trade position on the global stage. However, this move could trigger a large-scale trade war with severe economic consequences. Further is the world problem. The last time Trump initiated a 2-year trade war with China over massive trade surplus in 2018, it sent the world economy into a tizzy as the global supply chain suffered due to tit-for-tat tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. China ended the row in 2020 by agreeing to spend an extra $261 billion a year on U.S. goods. But the plan was derailed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and its annual trade deficit has since widened to $361 billion. Once trade tensions truly erupt and reach their peak, if nations fail to reach a common agreement, the conflict will persist, and it is highly likely that it will lead to a large-scale war, or, in other words, Armageddon. And this is the last war. In the last days. The Bible predicts that in the last days the Euphrates River will dry up to prepare the way for the kings of the East to pass through. The river itself is a massive land barrier that would hinder any army from advancing east to west. Revelation 16:12 mentioned, "The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east." The Bible doesn't say who the kings of the east are, and biblical scholars and theologians have different ideas about who they are. One popular interpretation is that the kings of the East are a reference to the rise of China and other Asian nations as powerful political and economic entities. John predicts in Revelation 9:16-18 that these kings of the East will boast a standing army of 200 million. This is a bold prophecy, especially when you consider that at the time he was writing, there weren't 200 million people on the planet. However, as you read this today, China has an army of more than 200 million, just as the Bible predicted. It's also worth noting that, whatever the kings of the East are, they are seen as a formidable force in the end times and are going to be part of the final battles that will take place before the return of Jesus. Either way, this massive army will need to cross the Euphrates on their way to the Valley of Armageddon. The drying up of the Euphrates River is a clear fulfillment of Bible prophecy and a sign that we must be ready for Jesus' return. As stated in Matthew 24:44, "Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." What is found if the Euphrates dries up? The drying up of the river also reveals many interesting and mysterious things while waiting for the day. Let's see what we found. A mountain of gold is the first thing that will be found when the river dries up. Gold has been one of the most sought-after metals throughout human history. It has been valued for its beauty, rarity, and versatility, and civilizations have been known to go to great lengths to acquire it. The Euphrates River, one of the most iconic waterways in the world, has been the subject of many myths and legends, and there have been claims that it contains vast amounts of gold. And once this river dries up, a mountain of gold will be revealed, and then everyone will panic because of it. For Muslims, many of the prophecies, especially related to signs of the Judgment Day that Prophet Muhammad stated 1400 years ago, have come true, like the drying of the Euphrates River. The Euphrates River is also mentioned in both the Bible and the Quran, where it is associated with prophecies and spiritual significance. The Euphrates River is mentioned several times in the Bible, and some prophecies speak of it as gold. One of the most well-known prophecies is found in the book of Revelation. The prophecies about the Euphrates River do not specifically state that there is gold in this river, but they do suggest that the river is associated with wealth and riches. Some people have interpreted these prophecies as evidence that the Euphrates River may contain significant gold deposits, which has led to speculation and myth about the possibility of finding gold in the river. In the Quran, there are also references to the Euphrates River. Information about the river gradually drying up attracts my attention and makes me think about these hadith. The Prophet Muhammad said, "The hour will not come to pass before the river Euphrates dries up to unveil the mountain of gold for which people will fight. 99 out of 100 will die in the fighting, and every man among them will say, 'Perhaps I may be the only one to remain alive.' Soon, the river Euphrates will disclose the treasure, the mountain of gold. So, who will be present at that time should not take anything from him." So, people claim that mountains of gold have been discovered from the Euphrates in Iraq, which proves the Quranic and biblical prophecies to be true. According to prophecy, golden mountains with large quantities of gold will be found, causing the greed of man to fight each other to death over it. However, the gold is cursed, and no one will get anything from it. All will die fighting for the gold. Prophecy. Now they have really found golden mountains and the river has dried up. Prophecy again. But there is one thing I think you need to keep in mind. Most likely, the gold mentioned in the Bible is not simply gold. It could be a metaphor for highly valuable things like uranium, oil, or something like that. And these things of enormous value will cause real wars. Can you imagine, in an area influenced by many countries like the Euphrates River, when a huge treasure appears, will people look at each other through the lens of peace? That is impossible, especially in a complex context like the one in the Middle East today. Conflict and war are completely possible, and so many scientists or leaders with more foresight have considered not letting this gold mining happen. The river is on the verge of drying up. What needs to appear is gradually appearing. Therefore, they need to think of one or more plans to quickly stop the conflict situation that is showing signs of becoming more serious if the Golden Mountain appears. What would happen if the area was declared a World Heritage Site and mining of the gold prohibited with harsh penalties and sanctions placed upon those mining, harvesting, or possessing the gold? Is it possible to distinguish this gold from other sources, countries, or regions? If the gold remains in the riverbed, would it contaminate the water, marine life, or local ecosystem? As the water passes through various dams, would it be naturally filtered and collected at those access points? Any attempts to divert or redirect the course of the river to access or otherwise obtain the gold illegally should be prohibited in an attempt to avert further conflict in the region. It is not likely that the Euphrates River drying up would reveal significant new deposits of gold. When a river dries up, it may expose areas that were previously underwater, which could potentially contain gold deposits that were previously hidden. However, this does not necessarily mean that significant new deposits of gold would be discovered. Gold deposits are typically found in areas where there has been geological activity, such as the movement of tectonic plates or volcanic activity, and the location of these deposits is determined by a complex set of factors such as the presence of certain minerals, temperature, and pressure. While the Euphrates River may have carried small amounts of gold deposits downstream in the past, it is unlikely that significant deposits would have accumulated in the riverbed due to the relatively low levels of erosion and sedimentation in the area. Therefore, any gold that may be present in the riverbed is likely to be in small amounts, and the drying up of the river is not likely to reveal large new deposits. It is also important to note that the drying up of the Euphrates River would have significant environmental and social impacts, as the river is an important source of water and livelihood for millions of people in the region. Any attempts to extract gold from the riverbed could also have negative environmental and social impacts and should be approached with caution and sensitivity. The second thing going to be found is the angel. As the sixth trumpet sounds in the apocalypse, St. John, seen in the right margin, hears a voice from the golden altar. The illuminator identified the voice as the Lord's by including the bottom of a mandala with the Lord's feet resting on an orb. The voice tells the angel with the trumpet to release the 4 angels who had been bound in the river Euphrates. In the miniature, these 4 avenging angels rise from the river with their weapons, ready to fulfill their mission of killing a third of the people on earth. And when the river dries up, how will this story unfold? We know that these are demonic beings because they are described as bound. Demons are fallen angels, many of whom are bound in chains of gloomy darkness. God's good angels are not bound but are free, as are some of Satan's angels or demons. Ephesians 6:12 tells us, "We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." The region of the Euphrates, where these 4 angels are bound, has a notorious relationship to human sin. The first murder was committed, presumably, not far from the Garden of Eden, in the Euphrates region. You can see this in Genesis 4:8. The first war in Genesis 14 Confederacy took place in that region. In Genesis 10, Nimrod began his kingdom there. Babylonian idolatry sprang up in the region and will be judged there. You can find this story in Zechariah 5 and Revelation 18. Some interpret the four angels as symbolic figures representing various spiritual forces or destructive powers at work in the world during the end times. They are seen as agents of judgment or instruments of God's wrath. Others suggest that the four angels may represent fallen angels or demonic entities associated with the region of the Euphrates River. This interpretation connects with the idea that these beings are released to bring about destruction and chaos. Certain interpretations propose that the four angels represent actual historical figures or powers, such as military leaders or nations, associated with the Euphrates region. This view links the imagery to specific geopolitical events or conflicts. God had planned significant destruction to the Roman Empire that had persecuted the church. That destruction was delayed so that God could arrange for his people's protection. Revelation 9:20-21 tells us that even after the damage caused by the releasing of the angels, the wicked did not learn any lessons and did not change. So, it can be said that the depletion of the Euphrates is just one of the signs of his presence. Everything reminds us that God is ultimately in control of these events, allowing or announcing each one. At no point in the end times is evil allowed to run entirely out of control. If the four angels are underneath in the underworld, then that might be the only thing protecting us all. The earth separates flesh from spiritual screams that could drop large groups of spirit-flesh beings from spirit beings that can shriek in airwaves and vibrations that are lethal to humans. If that's true, we can't stop it from coming. Four shrieking beasts whose screams would shake the whole earth. Signs of human civilization is the next thing to be found. The ancient Euphrates River had abundant water, and together with the nearby Tigris River and the Jordan River, the three rivers basin formed a crescent-shaped oasis and was historically known as the fertile land of the New Testament. This land can be said to be the largest oasis in the Middle East desert, and is also the cradle of civilization here. Scientists have revealed that life exists beneath this river. Right at the Euphrates River, humanity's first civilization appeared, the Sumerian civilization. Sumer is an ancient civilization that appeared around 3800 BC, founded in Mesopotamia in the Fertile Crescent, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, south of present-day Iraq. Their culture included a group of city-states, including Eridu, Nippur, Lagash, Kish, Ur, and the first city, Uruk. At its peak around 2800 BC, the city had a population of between 40,000 and 80,000 and was considered one of the most populous cities in the world at that time. The architecture of this area is also extremely special, when each city and state of Sumer is surrounded by a wall built of flat convex mud bricks. They even made pottery, weaved cloth, built many irrigation works, and knew how to use buffaloes and cows to plow fields before other ancient civilizations such as Egypt and the Yellow River. But this civilization did not last long. In 1940 BC, Sumer was invaded by the Elamites and looted the city-states. Then came the Hammurabi dynasty of Babylonia. The Babylonians unified the lands of Mesopotamia, and the Sumerians perished. By around 1700 BC, the Sumerians were gradually assimilated with the Assyrians and Babylonians. But once the Euphrates River dries up, many things will be revealed. Scientists found signs of the presence of writing, astronomy, mathematics, geometry, and medicine in the ancient ruins left by the Sumerians. Among them, there are many achievements that are still used by modern people to this day, such as the multiplication table, how to calculate area, circumference, or how to perform craniotomy. In addition, the Sumerians also developed many weapons and objects to support their many wars, such as spears, bronze helmets, and carried shields made of leather or wicker, chariots and carts known as combat vehicles. Not only that, they also might find voice of demons. Together with the Tigris, the Euphrates carves through present-day Syria and Iraq, before emptying into the Persian Gulf. For thousands of years, the twin rivers have allowed farming communities and grand cities to flourish in Mesopotamia, which is considered the cradle of some of the world's earliest civilizations. However, for several decades, it's become increasingly apparent that the Tigris-Euphrates River system is drying out. A report warned that the rivers could run dry very soon. Once the Euphrates River is drying up, many Christians are keeping their eyes on the Euphrates, and there is a Bible verse linked to the Euphrates. When the river dried up, people noticed a terrible sign happening here. The water level is falling below average, causing many things to be exposed. In there is something that will definitely scare you. When that horrifying sound was heard, everyone became extremely frightened. They think it is a sound coming from hell, the roar of the devil wanting to threaten God's children. Demons were, in biblical times and later, the answer to the evils that befell humans, including, among other things, diseases, blindness, and deformities. These are the words of a voice John hears coming from the four horns of the golden altar. You can see this in Revelation chapter 9, verse 13, the temple object described in Exodus chapter 27, verse 2. This voice commands the sixth angel with the trumpet to free the four angels who are held captive at the Euphrates River, the ancient boundary between Assyria and Israel. Once again, Revelation reminds us that God is ultimately in control of these events, allowing or announcing each one. At no point in the end times is evil allowed to run entirely out of control. We know that these are demonic beings because they are described as bound. Demons are fallen angels, many of whom are bound in chains of gloomy darkness. God's good angels are not bound but are free, as are some of Satan's angels, or demons. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12 tells us, "We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." This is the reason why you need to pay attention to every small change happen around the Euphrates River. This eastern boundary of Israel is associated in Scripture with the earth's first great atrocities. In Genesis, the Euphrates River is where sin started, where the first murder was committed. It's Aslo, where the first world rebellion against God started. It's where the Tower of Babel, the wellspring from which all idolatry and false religion started to flow. It's where all misery began, even the rise of God's people's greatest enemies and the scene of the most brutal civilizations in human history, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, and the Medes. How ironic this place, this site. God posits his plans to begin the end of everything that raises its fists against him. This army is like none other the world has ever seen, not simply because of its size, but because of its power to raise and kill. This army is surely hellish in nature and seemingly both human and demonic. Perhaps it describes a military that is inspired and driven by demons, an infernal cavalry of armed forces who belch out fire, smoke, and burning sulfur with all the characteristics of modern warfare. They may also utilize chemical warfare in the plagues they inflict. Not only under Euphrates River, there are demons everywhere. It's a major part of the reason there's so much discord and unrest in this world of ours. We can't see them, of course, but they're there, exerting what influence they can before Christ returns to put a stop to all that. This strange sound is also said to come from the fallen angels mentioned in Revelation. Are the fallen angels returning to fulfill the prophecies of the Scriptures? Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 says, "And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared." This scripture might possibly be coming true, as in recent years the Euphrates is drying up at a historic pace. One could dismiss it as global warming or global climate change, but even if that is the case, it doesn't stop the fact that John foretold this event hundreds of years ago. Now, if that was it, we could probably walk away and say, probably not, to the idea of fallen angels crawling out of the abyss. But there's more. Or you can take a look at this. Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 to 15 says, "Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a voice speaking from the four horns of the gold altar that stands in the presence of God. And the voice said to the sixth angel who held the trumpet, 'Release the four angels who are bound at the great Euphrates River.' Then the four angels who had been prepared for this hour and day and month and year were turned loose to kill 1/3 of all the people on earth. As the waters of the Euphrates have been receding, people have been venturing into territories that previously had been inaccessible before. What they are finding are caves or caverns that seem like they could have held someone or something prisoner at one time. In these areas, archaeologists have been recording sounds coming from the ground, sounds that make your skin crawl because they remind you of the monsters in your nightmares. Groans, moans, and growls can be heard on these recordings, and even what seems to be something moving around with chains connected to it. Could these be the fallen ones preparing to be released from their chambers under the great Euphrates? Will they come? And if they do, will they truly take 1/3 of human existence with them? This horrifying sound of fallen angels gearing up for their vengeful return, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, "Loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates." And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the 1/3 part of men. These fallen angels are hiding beneath the riverbed, carrying all their anger and hatred, and you don't know when they will explode. But this strange sound makes us even more scared than ever if it is true that it comes from these fallen angels. The sound rang out as a sign of their rebirth, and then other horrifying events of destruction will follow. I want you to be ready. What do we need to prepare for? The Euphrates drying up is interpreted by some as another piece of the end times puzzle, surely hastening the return of our Father. And when that day happened. The 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls in Revelation are 3 consecutive series of events related to God's judgment in the end times. These judgments become increasingly severe and catastrophic as the end times progress. The 7 seals, trumpets, and bowls are interconnected. The 7th seal initiates the 7 trumpets, and the 7th trumpet initiates the 7 bowls. The 7 bowls of judgment are described in Revelation 16. The 7 bowls of judgment are unleashed from the 7th trumpet. The first bowl causes harmful sores on humanity. The second bowl results in the death of every living creature in the sea. The third bowl turns the rivers into blood. The fourth bowl intensifies the heat of the sun, causing great agony. The fifth bowl brings darkness and amplifies the suffering caused by the first bowl. The sixth bowl dries up the Euphrates River, preparing the forces against Christ for the Battle of Armageddon. The 7th bowl caused a devastating earthquake, followed by massive hailstorms. Disaster will fall on humanity. That is God's punishment. But do not be afraid. Before judgment, we will see angels. I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or on any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God. He called out in a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea. Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. That is the mark of protection that he gives to his people. This is the eternity promised by God for those who believe in him. These are they who have come out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. and he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. But remember this: there is no final or last sign that warns us of his coming. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. This means that he will come at any given moment. Jesus can return, and we must all prepare and wait patiently until that time arrives. The Euphrates River is drying up, whether through natural or political causes. It makes little difference. It is significant that John prophesied 2,000 years ago that it would happen as one of the signs of the last days in Revelation 16:12. Believe the Bible or not, it seems to be coming up with some pretty strong evidence that Christ will soon return. Be prepared to meet him. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Just prepare as the 5 of the 10 virgins who brought extra lamp oil. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. Keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. And at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about the one whose life is founded on the rock of his word, being able to withstand the violent flood when it comes. Lived around 4,000 years ago, the land which lies between the Euphrates and the Nile rivers to him and his descendants. It is essential to note that the Euphrates River has faced increasing challenges in recent years, due to factors such as dam construction, agricultural use, and climate change, which have resulted in reduced water levels and environmental stress in the region. The fact is that the climate is always changing. Given enough history, the climate can look like the stock market. Just about the time everyone is convinced that it is all downhill or uphill from here, it has changed course. As far as the Euphrates River drying up, I am sure there is more than one factor that affects that. Not just the weather. One of those is that water is being drawn from the Euphrates River faster than it is being replenished. There are rivers in California that have all but disappeared because of farming. Efforts to manage water resources sustainably and address the impacts of human activities on the river's ecosystem are ongoing to ensure the long-term viability of the Euphrates River and its surrounding communities. When we talk about the river Euphrates drying up, you have to keep it in the right perspective if you are talking about Scripture and its fulfillment. The Euphrates drying, as mentioned in Revelation, is to create a direct route for the kings of the East to proceed to Jerusalem and attack the Antichrist, which, by the by, have upset a lot of nations at this time. This event will occur near the end of 7 years' reign of the Antichrist, just before Jesus returns. The end times have been upon us from the ministry of Christ on. That's 2,000 years of waiting to see if the sun still rises tomorrow. Rather than worry so, let us have faith in what Christ taught. No man knoweth, and it will come as a thief in the night. Those who are faithful will be prepared, not just spiritually for having repented, but physically and mentally, they will be able to do their work without worry and anxiety. The point of these signs is to give us courage and faith, to know that we're on the right course, even though the going is rough. Let us not worry about when that great day arrives then, and push forward as though every day is the last, knowing that our efforts will be rewarded accordingly. As I mentioned, the drying up of the Euphrates River makes people think that this is a sign of the end of the world, and the Bible says the same. So, what do we need to do? What do we need to prepare to face what is about to happen? When the great day of his wrath has come, when the earth shakes the mountains and the islands out of place, when stars fall from heaven and the sky recedes like a scroll, when kings and slaves alike cower in fear at the judgment God is raining down on a corrupt earth, all the physical preparation in the world won't make an ounce of difference. What should Christians be doing to get ready for the cataclysmic events preceding the end of the age and the second coming of Christ? Given the current state of affairs in the world, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that the Lord may be returning soon. Are we really supposed to run and hide as things get worse? Or should we stay where we are and continue to minister to the people around us? The Bible clearly instructs us to be vigilant, but it also teaches that no one can say for certain that we are living in the end times. This is at best a debatable proposition. Jesus himself repeatedly said that no one knows or can know the day or hour of his return. Oh, be sure, we are surrounded by events and developments that could be interpreted as signs of the end. On every hand, we see famines, earthquakes, disasters, troubles, persecutions, wars, and the drying up of the river. But let's assume for a moment that these are the end times. What then? How should a Christian respond? Fortunately, the Apostle Peter gives us a straightforward answer to this question. Writing specifically with reference to the end of the age, when the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat, and both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Peter does not suggest that believers head for the hills, adopt a fortress mentality, and start stockpiling food and weapons. Instead, he asks, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat? As Peter sees it, end-time Christians are called to do one thing. They are to practice holiness and do good to others wherever and whenever they can. They are supposed to work the works of God while it is day. Paul seems to have been thinking the same way when he wrote to the Galatians, "Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith." While others say, "Don't do unto others what you would not want to be done unto you," Jesus says, "Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you." That requires that you not only refrain from committing sins and crimes against one's neighbor, but it requires that we love our neighbors and we treat them with kindness, generosity, and patience. There are many people living in the present who consider themselves the best and ignore God's teachings. But in the end, they are just a soul standing before their Creator on Judgment Day, no more valuable or appreciated than the homeless beggar starving on the streets. Interestingly enough, there is a connection between being dependent on something else for your existence and being composed of parts, which speaks to Musk's intuition about looking for complexity to be explained by simplicity. Things are contingent precisely because what they are is distinct from the fact that they exist. So something must ultimately impart existence to their essence if they are to become and remain present in reality. Let's learn to observe, listen, and follow God's words if we want to be saved in the last days. For decades, this has been a problem. The river's drying up affects almost 7 million people. Crops are failing as a result of little rainfall, high temperatures, and river drying, forcing over 1,000 families to flee the villages surrounding the Euphrates River. IFL Science reports that in 2021, the Iraqi Ministry of Water Resources issued a warning the Tigris-Euphrates River system was at risk of drying up by 2040. This report blamed declining water levels and droughts driven by climate change, as per IFL Science. Low rainfall is a part of this, of course, but unfair water policies have made the problem much worse. Some areas that depend on the Euphrates River are impacted by government regimes that use water as a weapon by withholding water from other nations. In 2021, Syria accused Turkey of limiting water flow from the Euphrates at the Syrian-Turkish border. Water flow has also lessened due to Turkish dams located upstream. The long-time political instability of the region has impacted water levels in parts of the Euphrates. Pondering a river like the Euphrates drying up reminds us that we need to stay close to God's living water to prevent spiritual dryness in our own lives. The Euphrates River has spiritual significance for Christians because the Bible mentions it in both historical and prophetic contexts. It serves as a symbol of both positive and negative change and points to God's power over the natural world He has created. The Euphrates also can inspire us to reflect on the battle between good and evil, as well as the contrast between spiritual dryness and the spiritual fulfillment that God provides through Jesus, who provides the ultimate satisfaction for our spiritual thirst.